Hello and welcome to India's World. Nepal has picked 76-year-old Sushil Koirala of the Nepali Congress Party as its new Prime Minister. He is the fourth member of his extended family to become Prime Minister and was elected by two-thirds majority in a 601-member Constituent Assembly, which also functions as Nepal's parliament. Koirala will head a coalition government of the Nepali Congress and the Communist Party of Nepal United Marxist-Leninist, or UML. The UML, although a communist party, follows liberal politics and is different from the Maoists who were involved in a war against the Nepali state till 2006. The Maoists were routed in the Constituent Assembly elections held in November. They are now the main opposition party in the new Constituent Assembly. Formidable challenges of governance and constitution writing confront the new Nepal Prime Minister. To discuss them, I have with me a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Professor S.D. Muni, without doubt India's foremost expert on Nepal. He's been a professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University and at the National University of Singapore. He's been India's ambassador to Laos also. Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, he was India's High Commissioner in London, India's ambassador in Nepal at a very critical time. You were there when the monarchy was deposed and the first Constituent Assembly election was held. And we have with us Ambassador Jayant Prasad. He was also ambassador to Nepal. He has the distinction of being son of a former ambassador to Nepal also, and you were there also at a very critical time when constitution was being written, and you know the Nepalese leadership, the new Nepalese leadership, like nobody else in India. So welcome all of you to this discussion. Professor Muni, tell us about how this government came to be formed and why did it take 2.5 months? What is this 7-point agreement?
I think the 7-point agreement actually is a power sharing agreement, and this is a problem in Nepali politics from the beginning. I don't want to go into details, but you can compare it with what happened in 2008 between the Maoist and the Nepali Congress. This time it has happened between the Nepali Congress and the UML. And I think sorting out this power sharing arrangement probably took a lot of time, because the parties are internally divided. The leadership is not in control of their parties. They make commitments, go back to the parties and have to change it, and not only between the parties but also within the parties. I mean, that is what which has taken so much of time, and still there are question marks hanging.
Okay. Mr. Mukherjee, how easy or difficult will it be for Prime Minister Sushil Koirala to be able to write a constitution within 1 year, given the kind of fractiousness that exists within parties and amongst parties, as Professor Muni was pointing out?
Well, I don't think he has the Nepali government, the new Constituent Assembly has actually any choice but to finish writing the constitution this time. I mean, the people are extremely impatient. 6 years have passed from 2008, almost 6 years. And I agree fully with Professor Muni. If I can just cross the T's and dot the I's, the intra-party problems will bedevil both the leading two parties. In the Nepali Congress, you have the Prime Minister, of course, Sushil Koirala. You also have former Prime Minister Deoba, who's been Prime Minister 3 times, who's waiting in the wings and whose ambitions are very well known. And you have Ramchandra Paudel, who eventually, in an actual election to decide on the leader of the Nepali Congress, decided to go in favor of Mr. Koirala.
So you think becoming Prime Minister, no, we'll come to UML, but Sushil Koirala becoming Prime Minister would not sort of draw the curtain on these factional fights within the Nepali Congress. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it will not, because part of the whole process in Nepal seems to be deal making. One deal has already been made, which is now creating a bit of a crisis, which is that the UML wants a certain ministries. They give it a nice euphemism that they want to be represented in the cabinet with dignity. But
that will happen with any power sharing deal. But let me take the UML question to Ambassador Prasad. How much of a problem will this coalition partner cause for Mr. Koirala? Because as Professor Muni said earlier, then Ambassador Mukherjee, the fractiousness within the UML is such that is 3 leaders, Madhav Nepal, Jhalanath Khanal and KP Oli, are so ambitious that they often work at cross purposes. Their party convention is coming up in May, so their differences may get aggravated even further. So how much of a problem are they going to be to Prime Minister Koirala?
Well, I don't think the internal problems of UML are going to pose a problem in their dealing with the Congress, because the UML no doubt has 3 major factions within it, but they have shown a remarkable ability, organizational ability, to keep together on major party related issues. And they have shown it in the past, and everybody had written off the UML before this election. They have made a very strong showing, so strong that they have pushed the Maoists to the 3rd position in the stakes for seats in the Constituent Assembly. But there is a big problem. There is a deal, the subtext of the 7-point deal was that there would be mutual accommodation in the cabinet formation. And the cabinet now is constituted by a single political leader, Ram Sharan Mahat, minister without portfolio. UML is not yet part of government. And if UML and NC don't pull along and don't quickly constitute a government, 3 months have passed almost since the 19th November election. And the deadline for creating the draft outline of a new constitution by the major political leaders of all parties is 6 months. 6 months they would have the basic text ready, and 12 months they would promulgate it. That deadline will begin to slip if they don't have a government in place quickly.
Okay. All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit with this interesting discussion. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the challenges before the new Nepal government. Professor Muni, how would Sushil Koirala, or let me just say that, the deal making with UML will eventually take place. Nepalese like to talk a lot, they like holding meetings, but eventually they come to a settlement. So I am assuming that there will be a coalition government. But how would Sushil Koirala bring the Maoists on board? They have criticized this deal quite openly, saying that it should be abrogated, it should be scrapped. That is what Pushpa Kamal Dahal, aka Prachanda, has said. So is that just a statement being made by an opposition leader, a pro forma statement, or does it have a deeper meaning?
Well, it has a meaning in the sense that Maoists wanted to be the Constituent Assembly chief, and that was since it was bargained with the UML, they did not get it. So therefore, but otherwise, I think the Maoists have realized that if they create any problem in constitution making or running of the government, they would further lose the sympathy of the people. They have therefore committed that they are happy to sit in the opposition. They have even said that if UML does any problem, we will continue to extend support to the Nepali Congress from outside. So I don't think Maoist would be a major hurdle in Sushil carrying the bat forward, provided he also looks into the interest of the constituencies, particularly which not only Maoist, you are forgetting the Madhesh people.
I am coming.
They are also they are also out, and they are with the Maoists. So I think if the interest of these people, at least what they ask about, is taken care of, Sushil can carry on.
Okay, so he may be able to carry the Maoists with him, and even the Madhesis, Ambassador Mukherjee. What about the 23 pro-monarchist MPs who have made their way into parliament through proportional representation? How much of an obstacle can they be to constitution making?
I don't think they can be very much of an obstacle, provided the major parties come to a power sharing agreement.
And what about Mohan Vaidya's Communist Party of Nepal Maoists and the 33 party alliance?
The same logic would apply, because in terms of the numbers and in terms of the visibility of these parties within Nepal and their experience and so on, the main task facing the new Prime Minister is power sharing and building a national consensus. And if the major political parties, through compromise, however clumsy it is, like the interim constitution was, I mean, till almost midnight nothing happened, and then they lumped it all together and they got a constitution. It may be flawed, but it is a constitution. So
if the major parties cooperate,
the fringe won't matter if the big boys agree.
Okay. Ambassador Jayant Prasad, although Sushil Koirala has watched political developments for 23 years. He's been a member of parliament. He's never had any experience of governance or of administration. He's considered an honest man, hardworking man who lives simply. But is that enough to deal with the fractiousness of Nepali politics and the formidable challenges of constitution writing?
Bharat, what gives you the idea that to be a successful head of government, you have to be hands-on and you must need a lot of experience? I can cite you examples of very large democracies like the United States, where one of the most successful presidents ever, Ronald Reagan, had no notion of governance.
True.
Yet he was a successful president of the United States. So I don't see any reason why Sushil Koirala, if he has the right advisors and the right instincts, and he has behaved in an exemplary fashion after the resounding Congress victory. He could have exulted in victory, but he reached out to the Maoists, and the Maoists have responded, as Professor Muni said. They are even willing to extend Congress support in case government begins doddering. So that's, I think, a good sign.
Okay. Professor Muni, you've known Sushil Koirala, but in public he's known to have a rigid stand on the role of Nepal's neighbors in Nepal's politics. In the past, he's been very critical of India and India's role. What has been your experience with him?
I think he's a very nice person. I know him since the early 80s. In Banaras, we were together, and I know him in various ways. I think he's, you know, the complaints of political parties in Nepal against India are periodic, and they depend more on the weather, on the political weather. Where they are placed. And if there were times when Sushil felt that Nepali Congress was being neglected or was being marginalized, so they will air their views in one way or the other. But you would recall that Sushil was best treated last time when he visited India. He met
although at one point the diplomatic staff in the Indian embassy apparently was not even talking to him. He was not invited to events, particularly when he took very hard stance on ethnic federalism. Is that a correct impression?
That's absolutely not correct. He was invited to all events and he chose which events to come to. But all political leaders were always invited to the Indian mission, and it had an open door policy. And Sushil ji, his only fault, if you say it's a fault in a political leader, is that he is a truly honest person, and he is so honest that whatever opinion he has, he articulates them with the people he interacts with. And I would say that that's a merit in the sense that you know exactly where he stands. And he has made a statement very plain and forthright that he will be mindful of India's interests.
Well, that every Prime Minister makes. But we always say for every Prime Minister of Nepal that he's a great guy, friend of India, so on and so forth. It is true that outside power, a lot of politicians are critical of India. When they assume power, they probably see the ground realities and become friendly. But what is your assessment of Sushil Koirala? Do you agree with the gentleman?
Yes, up to a point. All three of us, I think, have known him. My personal impression is that of a person who is certainly not a charismatic politician. He's a quiet person whose forte has been, you said he lacks administrative experience. He does in government, but he does not lack it within the party. He knows his party very well indeed. So, in terms of being able to keep the party together, he stands a better chance than most leaders in the Nepali Congress. And if he can do that, then his chances of getting the other big parties, and I keep repeating the big parties, the more important parties, because they will call the shots, of getting them together with him in the all-important task of power sharing and building a national consensus for creating the new constitution will be much easier. He is also not, as the Indian press in many articles have portrayed him, a swashbuckling hijacker and so on and so forth. He's quite the reverse, as a matter of fact. And I personally think he has nursed ambitions of being the Prime Minister. I mean, I can personally testify to that. So he's a willing Prime Minister. He's not some reluctant barcase who's been forced into it.
Nobody calls him a reluctant Prime Minister. They may call him a lot of other things.
Right. So I don't think, I think India can do business with him.
Yeah.
I think, as always, India should stand ready to help in areas where the Nepalis want, not just want help, not impose our thinking on them. And I see light at the end of the tunnel.
All right.
But it's a long tunnel.
All right. So we've got a good man in the saddle in Nepal, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the challenges before the new Nepal government. Professor Muni, do you think the new government of Prime Minister Sushil Koirala will be a stable government? Because the kind of feeling I get is that he is capable of providing a stable government. Or would that stability also depend on external factors?
Well, it depends on two factors. One is internal, which we have already discussed.
Yeah.
If the equations really get disrupted, he may be in trouble. And the second is international community. Yeah. Whether the world outside wants a stable Nepal, or it is still going to play games in terms of what their specific preferences are in Nepal.
Yeah.
And I think that can be very destabilizing.
Yeah.
If the outside forces do not see a certain move, a certain direction in Kathmandu to be acceptable and want to dislodge that.
No, but all outside forces are equally important, or some are more equal than others?
Well, I would say India and US are critical, but China is trying to become critical. Of course, China would not have much of a say in terms of toppling or stabilizing the governments. But India, of course, is always considered a major factor. Yeah. And I think US and European economy are equally influential.
Okay. On a slightly different issue, Ambassador Mukherjee, on the constitutional issues, the Nepali political parties are locked into rigid positions. For example, the form of government, prime ministerial or presidential, or some people say directly elected prime minister. Also on ethnic federalism, they have set positions. Do you think Sushil Koirala will be able to persuade these parties to loosen their positions a bit so that a compromise can be reached?
Well, he'll have to, because these are the two big questions that have to be solved, because everybody knows that about 90+% of the constitution.
But would he not have to loosen his own position first, because he's also very rigid about ethnic federalism? He's opposed to it completely.
Well, this is the entirely, as I repeat, this is exactly what he will have to do. There'll have to be compromises and give and take, no matter how clumsy they are, because otherwise you're locked into the same positions as you were for 5.5 years. Don't forget, the earlier constitution took a few months to actually finalize, and this has been such a long drawn out affair that there are a number of educated Nepalis who are saying that, look, life is carrying on, so who needs a government?
All right. Master Prasad, the other contentious issue is of the judiciary. The Maoists, for some strange reason, don't want separation of powers between the Parliament and the judiciary and the executive. They want judiciary to be accountable to Parliament. So you have Nepali Congress, UML and the Madhesis on one side, wanting the judiciary to be independent, and the Maoists on the other side. Then the Madhesis are on one side and everybody else is on the other side, because the Madhesis say structurally they are not represented in the judiciary anyway. So how do you tackle these kind of issues, unless you tackle them through consensus? And is that consensus possible?
Well, the consensus is going to be difficult, but it has to be attempted. Let's not forget that there is one consensus already established in Nepali politics, with the exclusion of the 23-24 members of the Rashtriya RPP Nepal. This is a consensus that Nepal will be a secular, federal, democratic republic. On that there is no quarrel. And one of the primary elements of the 7-point agreement between Congress and UML has been that the gains made by the last CA, the broad understandings reached, including on independence of judiciary, must be respected. So if they start with this premise, look at the Maoists. The Maoists have also come on record to say that they want the constitution to be based on the 12-point agreement and the comprehensive peace agreement of 2006. If you take these elements together, then you already have the basis, a strong parameters being already established for a compromise.
Professor Muni, you wanted to say
I
something?
just wanted to say that, you know, in the deal between UML and NC, they have accepted that whatever has been agreed so far will remain on the board.
Exactly.
Therefore,
own historical declarations made by the first
all
meeting
will
in the
have
last
to be
year.
accepted, which has already sorted out most of the issues, except the number of federal provinces which you want to have, or the form of government. And I think the Maoists would not create a problem.
But everybody who's got a pen and a map is drawing a different map of
no, but
Nepal.
Bharat, they had already you know, worked out some figures, 10, 11, 5.
No, it's a shape. So they say now I am told the last thing is that you will have a vertical province in the east, vertical province in the west, and others will be more ethnic.
Let us assume that that's not a major political issue. Once they decide on the number of these states and the basic criteria, it will be left to the technicians to work out and draw the lines. And once the technicians do I think all the political parties will have to accept.
Well, the technicians will have to base themselves on census data, which actually shows that ethnicities have got so mixed up that, you know, it's foolish to talk about ethnic
But once you set down the criteria, this is like 2 identities or 3 identities or 1 identity. Once you sort that out, I think technicians would, there is no doubt that they have the capability to do this.
So you're very optimistic, because, you know, then there will be problems of naming. If it's an ethnic province, then should the name come in the, you know, designating the province? How many names will be there if it's 3 ethnicity?
No, that should be decided earlier, whether you are going to name a province on the basis of ethnic identity. That's the whole trouble. That's a major political issue. If you sort it out, I am saying, if once you sort it out, the technical capabilities are very much there. Politically, it may be a problem.
Okay, so we've got only 2 minutes now. So what I want to for you to talk about, Ambassador Mukherjee, is quickly about, does Koirala have a foreign policy vision of any kind? Because, you know, one hasn't heard much, you know, except for the sporadic statements that come out, and only one statement I know, which I think Ambassador Jayant Prasad quoted. So what do you think his foreign policy vision is going to be?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, he's made very few pronouncements on foreign policy, virtually none. I mean, he's concentrated on the party and on Congress affairs and Nepali affairs. So one can assume that there will be a certain amount of continuity in terms of Nepal's vision of foreign policy. I don't think he's going to have any drastic changes to introduce right at the you know, in the near or even in the medium term future.
That's good to know. But Ambassador Prasad, how has instability in Nepal affected Indo-Nepal relations, or do they carry on, you know, irrespective of the instability? What are the factors, I mean, which actually keep us, although we are very close culturally, civilizationally, in terms of religion also, but what are the factors that keep us estranged? And do these factors have anything to do with instability in Nepal?
No, I think the factors for instability in Nepal are completely indigenous, internal. Why there is a certain sensitivity about relations with India? Because India is present everywhere. Nepal has a resident population of 27 million. Upward of 5 million Nepalese live and work in India and support their families from India. India accounts for 71% of Nepal's exports. China accounts for 1.5% of Nepal's exports. I mean, Indian currency and the Nepalese currency are linked in a way that it is an invariable rate of exchange. So the thing is that our most populous states, UP and Bihar, abut Nepal. Our peoples in the border areas speak the same languages. So there
instability won't make a difference.
No, the similarity between India and Nepal and our two peoples leads to very great people-to-people relations, which gives it a certain solidity outside of the relationship that exists between Kathmandu and New Delhi. Number one. But number two.
No, we're running out of time.
Sorry.
Last word to you. Do you agree with him that instability is an internal issue of Nepal? Our relationship will continue irrespective of what happens there.
Well, I think it affects, and to a great deal, instability also depends upon the nature of India-Nepal relations.
All right. Okay, we've run out of time. So thank you very much for coming here and analyzing this situation, the developing scenario in Nepal. and let's hope Nepal settles down soon and we'll have a more friendly Nepal with a friendly person as Prime Minister. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.